waiting patiently. I have nothing to report on, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell me what you have now on your desk, and I want to hear it all. What are these first impressions? Tell me.
I've got it here. I went with the 14-inch MacBook Pro. This is in space gray. I've only been using it a little bit because we still have to work today, so there's like stuff we got to do. But yeah, this is everything I was hoping it would be. First impressions, let's see. First, taking it out of the box, this thing is chunky. It is thick. It is, I mean, this is the 14-inch, but it feels much more substantial than the older version, and that's because it is. It's thicker. It's just physically bigger, but I'm really loving this squared off design. It's very reminiscent of the, what were they called? The Santa Rosa MacBook Pro.
Yeah,
and the one
Santa
before
Rosa
that,
MacBook Pros, PowerBooks.
the PowerBooks. It gives you that vibe very much, and the bottom is kind of rounded, but then the top is very squared. It's an interesting look. I absolutely love it. I think they hit it out of the park there. You can see that MacBook Pro emblem on the bottom. I mean, there's not much here that I would want more. Now, there was only one thing that was kind of iffy before I actually got it in my hands. This plant is in the way, so you guys can't see this beautiful MacBook. But and that's the notch. How is the notch going to be? Is it going to be really distracting? Is it going to be a deal breaker? And I will say this. No, it is completely not a deal breaker. It is not really distracting. I'm completely used to it. Although there are a few weird things. So I think last week you had mentioned that you saw someone on Twitter say that the notch, how does the notch interact with the display? Would the cursor go around it? Would it go through it? I think you said, whoever reported that on Twitter said that it would act as if the notch was part of the bezel, so it would go around it.
I can't remember. I thought someone said, according to some Apple employee, that the cursor, I think, would go behind it, because that was the debate, was would it go behind it or would it go around it? And I think I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, we have the replay, but I think it goes behind, right? Is that how it works?
Well, either way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the report was, because it does go behind it. So it's as if the notch isn't there. So when you take the mouse and go through, it just disappears for a second and comes back on the other side. I don't know if I love that. That's kind of weird, because it's like, physically there's something there, so maybe it should go around, but that's not a big deal. That's the only weird thing I noticed with the notch so far. Actually, no, there's another thing. The menu bar is pushed up, which is great, so you get more screen real estate, but it really bothers me that for whatever reason the menu bar is slightly bigger than the notch. So it's not like the bottom of the menu bar ends where the notch ends. It's also a little bit below the notch, which I don't understand what that is. I did the different scaling and it didn't change any of that. That's just kind of weird. It's a little nitpick. It's not really a big deal. We've already seen some utilities out that will make this a completely black area if you want to do that. So notch is not a big issue, but literally every single thing else about this computer is awesome. The screen, the 120 hertz display with the mini LED, it gets bright. The first thing I did was booted up YouTube and went to find an HDR video, loaded it in 4K HDR, blasted the 6-speaker system, and I mean, it's everything I was hoping to be. The screen is awesome, speakers are awesome, keyboard is great. I mean, it's about as good as I was hoping it would be. The only thing I haven't been able to do is really test the performance. Now, we'll talk about that in a second, because there's been plenty of other people who have had their embargoes lift and have now had the computer since it's out. And basically the performance is great. I haven't personally been able to test that, but from your, living vicariously through not only me, but everyone else who has now had their MacBook Pro, what are your initial thoughts?
I mean, the design looks fantastic. It's nice to see the ports return. I feel like
I didn't even mention
everything about this is great. I feel like the only gripe, if you had a gripe, it's going to be with the notch on the top, but I feel like that's one of those things, like on the iPhone, you just sort of get used to it and it just sort of goes away.
Exactly.
My only question for you, which I didn't really see covered that much in the reviews, granted, a lot of the reviews this year were very not even reviews.
I think it was rushed. They didn't have enough time,
Everybody was busy, I get that. Tell me about ProMotion. So I heard mini LED display is great. It looks fantastic. Size looks great. Do you notice ProMotion or not? And as everybody would love to see this on a spec sheet and like, oh, Apple's got to do it. Okay, they did it. Do you think it's worth it, or do you think that this would have been a great Mac without ProMotion on the screen?
So I'll say up front, I'm really glad that ProMotion is here. Although it's not something I'm really noticing all that much. And there's really one main reason for that. On the iPhone or on the iPad, whenever you're using it, you are physically interacting with the screen. And there's a ton of animations. You're moving, scrolling with your finger. So having a really fluid experience is important. But when you're on a Mac, there's not that many animations. Really, it's when you open and close a window, when you're scrolling on a web page. And besides that, that's kind of it. So most of the time, it feels kind of static and normal like it did before. That being said, though, I'm happy that it's here because when you do get those animations and when you are scrolling, it's noticeable and it's nice. And it just adds on top of it, having the mini LED display, which is very contrasty, very vibrant, and also very bright. And then adding the 120 hertz on top of it. I'm happy it's here, although I will be testing whether or not there's a decent or noticeable battery difference between 120 hertz and 60 hertz, because personally, the way I've been using it so far, if there's a noticeable battery gain from having it in 60 hertz, I might keep it there because the 120 hertz doesn't affect the Mac, in my opinion, as it does on the iPhone or the iPad. But yeah, I'm happy it's here. It's kind of interesting though. Now this display, and I guess the one on the iPad Pro as well, is actually kind of better than the Pro Display XDR, although obviously it's much smaller, less resolution. But from a spec standpoint, we got to get promotion on that Pro Display.
There's got to be a change coming with Pro Display. Maybe we talk about that later because there were some rumors on that sort of morphed into iMac stuff.
Yeah, we should definitely
my
talk
other
about that.
question, since I'm just curious, I've got my 16-inch MacBook Pro in front of me that has the refined keyboard. It's better. It's great. What's the keyboard situation like on the new MacBook Pro? Is it the same as what was on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, or is it different? Because I couldn't really tell because Apple said, we're going to take the standalone Magic Keyboard that they sell wirelessly and then put that in there. How does it compare to the one we had in the MacBook Pro before?
I'm going to have to do a headphone change because my AirPods keep disconnecting. I missed
problem.
half of that question. So let me switch to my AirPods Max.
No problem.
We can keep this in because this is live. This is how it works when you're having a Bluetooth. All right, you're talking about the keyboard.
Yes.
And basically, what was the last part of that question?
How similar or different is it to the 16-inch MacBook Pro keyboard that I think is really
Still
great?
not connected.
See, let me just, this is why I switched away from the AirPods auto switching, because it never works.
I know.
Or it
It's so
connects or disconnects you when you don't want it to, and it doesn't work when you want it to. So
Yeah.
what they
Well,
really
I'm
need,
back now, though.
They need you to, they need multi-device support, which I don't know why isn't there. But anyways, how similar or different is it to the keyboard in the current 16-inch MacBook Pro? Because I really like that keyboard, and I want to know how this new one compares, if it's different at all.
I don't know. Maybe technically it is different, but it doesn't feel any different to me. I guess the closest comparison, because this is basically a 1-to-1, it feels exactly the same, is the new iMac keyboard. So the keyboard that ships with Touch ID now, it feels exactly the same as that keyboard. And when I compare it to my 16-inch, it feels basically the same as that as well. There's just no touch bar. But I really do enjoy the black finish that you have here. I think it looks so clean. It looks really nice and really makes the keyboard kind of almost sunken in there. It's a cool look. I will say it took me a second, which is kind of weird because I don't use the touch bar that often, but it took me a second to, like, I went to go change the volume once, and I guess on my 16-inch, even though I don't use it as a laptop that often, I'm used to just kind of sliding and like tapping, and I went up to change the volume and I did that exact move, which is weird. I don't know how that's ingrained in my mind, even though I really rarely actually do it that way, but I think touch bar being gone is still overall a good thing for this keyboard. Touch ID is there, it works. I also saw some reports that maybe there was a backlight on Touch ID. I have not noticed that.
Yes.
Maybe it's there, but I just haven't gotten there. So there's another question possibly answered there.
So here's my other question for you. Speaking of clamshell mode, I have always primarily used my MacBook Pro in clamshell mode. And I think that a lot of people are buying this machine similar to us, where they want the power and the performance and they like the display, but they don't necessarily ever even really want to use it. So I know for me, I went with the 14-inch model because I have no need for the 16-inch display. I'm never really going to use it in laptop mode, or I guess very rarely. It takes up more space on my desk. I can get the same performance for the most part. We'll talk about that in a second, but 14-inch seems like the way to go. You had told me before that it's almost like a crime if you were to use this in clamshell mode. What do you mean by that, and what are your plans moving forward? Are you gonna put this up with a larger monitor and sort of use it as a desktop-esque machine, or are you going to embrace the mobile lifestyle and go all in on laptop mode?
Well, I'm not going to go all in on laptop mode because, I mean, just the amount of work we do, the kind of work that we do, all this video editing, although the screen on this laptop is excellent, I still just need that size. It's just something you can't really get around for the work that we do. But basically what I meant by that is the screen is so good. I think you'll feel the same when you see the screen for the first time. Is just, it's very vibrant. It's very responsive because of that ProMotion. It just is a really good screen. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've used the M1 iPad Pro with it's very similar display. It's got the Pro Display XDR or whatever. I forgot what they call
Liquid Retina
Liquid
XDR,
Retina XDR,
whatever they call it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've used it. It was kind of the same experience where, like, okay, am I going to say that this is like a leap from no retina to retina? I don't think it's that big of a leap, but it's noticeable in day-to-day. For instance, you could probably see it if you're watching the video version, but it's a cloudy day or semi-overcast, and the clouds keep going by, and then the sun keeps blasting in, so it looks a little bright in here. But every time the sun goes in, my main monitor, which is right here that you can't see off camera, is very dim. It's like, I think it's 500 nits max, which is very typical for a third-party display. But my iPad Pro, which I'm kind of monitoring everything on right here, is 1,000 nits. And every time it gets sunny, my kind of main display here gets a little dim, but my regular iPad Pro here looks perfect. That's one of the benefits. And it's like, it's not a difference between retina and not retina. It's not that big of a difference, but it's so much more helpful that I love having that kind of feature. Hey, you made it to the end of this Apple Circle podcast clip, but there is a full episode. So if you want to listen to that, click the video over here. You can watch the entire thing. Or if you're someone who just wants to listen in your headphones, we have the audio version, of course. Links for that, where you can subscribe and listen in your favorite audio podcast player, is down below. And last but not least, the Apple Circle channel, where we have many videos covering everything Apple, is also linked down below. So be sure to check that out and get subscribed.